So exciting. Hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Thorne, and I'm super happy to be here again this week. This week, I have Jenny Chappelle. See, look, I gestured on the right side of the screen. Jenny is joining me today. Usually I go like this, and then there's nobody over there. And then here go. I was like, and then my webcam focuses. So today I have Jenny with me. She is a RevPit editor and a very fantastic person. And I'm very excited that she was able to join me for this critique today. Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, no, you did a great job. Beyond that, I'm super excited to help out with this. It's a format that I haven't done before, which is always fun and exciting, so I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah, so for anybody who's new to this, we take every Saturday, we open up submissions so that people who want to have their pages read can put in, their name, and then we do a drawing on Sunday in order to pick the winners. This week we have Noreen and Noreen, right? Noreen. I keep getting that wrong. Yeah, Noreen. So this week we have Noreen and Anne, who were our winners. So we're going to be reading in that order. Noreen has sent us a women's fiction contemporary called Sanna's Suitors. And I'm so sorry if I butcher any kind of foreign language. You guys, if you've tuned in last time, you know how badly I am at this. I'm going to try my best. Sanna's Suitors is a women's fiction contemporary. And then Anne sent us a historical fiction by the name of Mystery on the Mersey. So we will be starting with Sanna's Suitors. So let's go ahead and open this up. Okay, there we go. And this one is interesting because it starts, both of ours actually this week are middle of the book submissions, or beginning of the book submissions, but not the first pages. So keep that in mind as you guys are tuning in to listen to this. And if you are deciding to comment in our live stream section, please do keep in mind that whatever comments you do take a couple seconds for them to show up on the software that we're using. So if we don't respond to you, that's probably why. And keep everything positive in the comment section. We want to make sure that this is like a nice encouraging space for everybody, that it's like people walk away feeling inspired to go and edit their books as opposed to just like sad. So if you're going to be commenting at anywhere, we request that they stay positive over there. So here we go. Chapter 7, Sanna. It's the perfect end to a miserable day. Here I am in near freezing temperatures with a dead car and my poor mother shivering with me. The cold air hits my back like a giant wave, and I huddle with Ami as we walk towards the store. The doors are locked, so we're stuck outside. Great. I usher Ami away from the storefront. My numb fingers dial for AAA. They deliver more bad news. It could be an hour, Miss Khan. I open the door to let her in my back seat. Ami talks in my other ear. I'm not even going to try with the foreign stuff. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to skip over that because it's just going to be an insult. Are they coming right away? Tell them that you're with your old mother stranded out in the cold. She rubs her hands to keep warm, then rustles the papers in the back seat. What a mess this car is, Betty. This car is for seating humans, not books. Ami, please, not the library books. Also, AAA customer service doesn't have time to hear my life story. Everyone that's stranded is just trying to get home. I'll get you an Uber to take you home. I'm not going to leave you alone here this late. She crosses her arm and continues to throw my books in the back seat corner. Ami, please, I'll be okay. They'll be here soon. I'll sit in the car and wait. We don't both need to be out in the cold. I don't want you to catch pneumonia. I call an Uber. Adam's text illuminates my screen soon after. How have you been? Stuck with a broken car. Geez, Sanna, get rid of that heap. Where are you? Are you alone or with Amy? I'm stuck with Ami. You're home? Everything okay? This is news to me. His concern warms my heart. But I don't know. But I don't know if I should continue this conversation any further, as my mother has stopped being restless in the back seat. I type TTYL. Ami is straining over my shoulder, so I peer over and hit a few buttons before I lock my phone. Sala, you bear driver? You bear. She shifts, causing my books and papers in the back seat to rustle. I check my phone. He's still at least 10 minutes away. Don't curse, Ami. Mr. Singh will pick us up soon. An SUV's bright lights blind my visions. Oh my God, I can read, I promise. As it pulls up next to me, my pulse drums. I check my lock door. I unlock my phone and my fingers hover over the emergency numbers. There's not another car in sight. The security car is probably close, but not in sight. Damn it. Is that our U-Bear? She lowers the window using the levers, her shoulders moving up and down. I rack my brain to come up with an excuse to not alarm Ami. I have to stay calm and not lose my shit. A tap on the window. Allah, please let him not kill us when he finds out I have loose change in my wallet. And if the most valuable thing in the car is the gold chain around Ami's neck. She never takes it off because it was the last gift Abba bought her. Could this day get any worse? A tap again. I call 911. I look up and flash my phone to the perpetrator. A familiar muffled voice says my name. The voice on the phone comes, 911, what's your emergency? Adam, how do you... Ma'am? The woman on the phone's voice booms. Sorry, I dialed by mistake. Please don't waste our time like this. There are real people with emergencies. Click. Hayne, who is this? Ami yells from the back seat. I step out of the car and tug on my coat to ward off the cold air causing my hands to shake. Maybe it's the adrenaline. What? You hung up and then turned on your location. I was worried. His hand that's about to touch my shoulder retreats when he hears a shuffle of feet behind me. Ami opens his back seat and jumps into the SUV. I hold up a hand and follow Ami. She pats on the seat. Let's go. Ami, this isn't an Uber. This is a friend of mine, Adam. I curse myself internally for this awkward encounter. I must have pressed enable location for the Uber and forgotten to turn it off. Technology is so dicey. Meanwhile, Ami fixes her shawl and bobs her head. Fear? Let's go. It's cold and close to the door. It's cold and close the door, please. My mother acts as if I'd spoken to her in another language. Adam smiles and says, Uber at your service, ma'am. I shiver as a cold gust of wind rattles my bones. The thud on the back door closing makes me shudder. Maybe it's the wind or the awkwardness of the situation and how this could go downhill fast. He opens the front door, and just as I'm about to settle in the front seat, a whir of car engine and headlights shine on us. An illuminated Uber sign flashes through the front. Adam whispers close to my ear, his warm breath fanning part of my face. Let me handle it. I want to protest, but with Ami in the back seat rubbing her hands, I decide not to contend. Adam talks to the driver and hands him cash while he steals a glance at me. The Uber driver backs out. I put a reminder, pay Adam back, in my phone. He's not an Uber driver, Ami. He's a what? Friend? Fake suitor? I don't know what to tell her. First impressions are so important to her that I don't want to say anything wrong. Ami cups a hand to her ear. Hayne, what are you mumbling, Sana? So many times I've told you, speak clearly or hold your peace. It's called speak for now or forever hold your peace, Ami. I speak up so she can hear above the whir of the heaters. Han, whatever. She shakes her head and her phone pings with a text message. Ami gives her her phone. Sana, Jose just texted me. I texted him back. Here, call him. Ami has an Urdu to English translator on her text, so she texts him, Sana, dead car, please assist with waiting. I hope Jose didn't call 911 after that text. I call him back to make sure. Jose, sorry, it's Sana. My car died. I hope you and Zia are okay. I skip the formalities to put his mind at ease. Jose chuckles. We're at the McDonald's grabbing dinner. By the way, they're treating Zia like royalty. He got a free meal. The manager says Zia is their special guest. I wonder what brought that about. We'll be home soon. Call if you need anything. I hang up. By the time we're done putting my car on the tow truck, it's close to 10. Adam is in the car with Ami while I sign papers for the tow truck driver. We follow the car to the garage where it will be repaired. I make sure to take down the address and number, then sign a barrage of papers for the tow truck driver. Meanwhile, Ami is talking to Adam in Urdu while they sit in the car and wait. Leave him alone for 2 minutes and he's charming my poor hapless mother. Adam is smooth, but I'm not sure he knows what he's getting himself into. Son, you look like you're from a good family. Why are you a taxi driver? Ami doesn't hesitate a second before laying it on him. Ugh, Ami. It's freezing, but sweat gathers at my brow. I want to drown in a pool of my embarrassing sweat right now. He chuckles. Auntie, we all have to make a living somewhere. He's calling Ami Auntie. This should bring a sense of calm, but somehow I feel the opposite, as if this isn't natural, like I should delay the process of integrating Adam into our lives, like something's missing. Son, you drive this, what do they call it? U-Bear all the time? Is this your job? Did you go to school? My mother is hell-bent on knowing his history and geography right now. He doesn't hesitate or make a face to discourage her. He seems comfortable with her probing, and if I didn't know him any better, I'd think he was even enjoying it. I have to save him. I thank the tow truck driver and hurry to the car. Not even going to try. He will never be kind to any stranded deceased after this. I settle in the front seat and mouth a silent thank you, then sorry to Adam. Ari, I was just having a chitter-chatter with him, Ami says, clueless. Auntie, I don't mind at all, this chitter-chatter. Adam turns his head a little to tell Ami in the back seat. I have a small cafe in downtown Trenton, and I'm not a taxi driver. I just wanted to help out a sauna. And when I found sauna, I guess, And when I found out you both were stranded. Sorry, Ami. Sorry. Ami leans in closer and talks to me in the front seat. In that case, you should stop by for chai one day. Are your parents in New Jersey? Inshallah. I don't know if that's a typo. Definitely. My father appreciates a great chai. He's from Pakistan. Adam pulls out of the parking lot. Directions, Sana? I type Ami's address in his car's navigation system. Now he knows where Ami lives, and no matter how hard I try, these are pieces of me I cannot unshare. This is supposed to be temporary. I need to stop this. The problem is I don't know how. I'm sure Adam's family is busy. His mother is a famous designer, Ami. They have stores throughout the country. I turn a little to Ami and explain to her that Adam's family is well-to-do, even though he isn't part of his mother's business. You talk so much, Bakwas. Nonsense. I'm sure she can spare some time to visit, she continues. He gives me a quick glance before replying, Don't worry, Auntie. I'll bring her in for chai soon. Ami gushes and thanks him multiple times. We pull into Ami's driveway. Zia and Jose are waiting for us. I don't want Adam to get out of the car. I just wish I could say goodbye and send him away. I'm not ready for him to meet Zia. Ami, Baji. Zia runs to us. Jose follows. Zia holds his McDonald's bag in one hand, and when he sees Adam in the car, stops and asks, Who is he? He points, taking a step back. Zia gets nervous around strangers. Jose stands next to him. It's okay, Zia. Let's say hi, that's all. Jose holds Zia's hand and helps him stretch out a bit for a handshake. I'm not ready for Adam to be introduced to Zia. I don't want to introduce anyone in his life right now. Nervously, I watch Adam break into a big, disarming smile and take a fervent step toward Zia. He hesitates and shakes Adam's outstretched hand in a swift motion. I love Star Wars. I see we have something in common. Adam points to Zia's t-shirt. Zia lets go of his hand and stares at the Star Wars themed shirt. Who's your favorite character? Adam asks. Han Solo, and my favorite movie is Return of the Jedi. Zia hums the thematic music, and Adam joins him. Then he turns around and joins Jose a few steps away. Jose pats Zia's shoulder, and then Adam says, Let's say goodbyes, please. Goodbye, mister, Zia says and walks away. Jose follows him. Ami goes in with them. My brother has special needs. He means the world to me. I'm glad he seems to like you. I look at the floor, scraping my shoe against it. Thanks. Adam's teeth gleam through a wide grin, and he turns his sparkling eyes on me. My insides churn. He leans in, spicing the air between us with whiffs of musk and vanilla, and whispers, He'll get used to me. I'll make sure of it. Sana, do you have the keys? I can't dig mine out, Ami yells. I have to go. I'll see you soon. I start to walk away. Oh, and Adam, you were my Desi hero today, as Annie would say. Adam waves, then trudges off. I fidget with my purse, embarrassed. They're all waiting for me at the door because Ami cannot find the keys in her monstrosity of a bag. She pulls out the safety pins, tissues, and change purse one by one. No keys. I fish mine out, and we all enter. I'm sorry, Jose. I smile. Sure, no problem. He gets my signature on his papers and leaves. Zia is tired, so he walks up to his room. I stay downstairs, make myself a cup of chai, and ponder Adam and Zia. I sit on my bed with my feet folded underneath and analyze all my interactions with him. He seems good on paper, yet somewhere I wait for the other shoe to drop, for the clock to strike midnight, and for everything to turn to normal. He seems like the Prince Charming. Then why does my heart not react to him the way it should, the way it does for someone else? Ooh, love that ending. Okay, so this is clearly the middle of a book, and I'm really glad you put chapter 7 up here because when I first read this, I initially genuinely thought it was the first page and had different things to say. But knowing that this is chapter 7 and that we've already been introduced to these characters, I think that it's important to remember that, like when we met Zia, I was confused, but obviously this is the beginning. And I think Jenny had something to say on that, where reading something in the beginning of the book, but not the first couple chapters, kind of puts us a little bit out of the loop. Jenny, do you have anything?
Right. Mm-hmm. Just that when you read something that isn't the beginning, you don't get the full context of the story. So normally, beginnings are so hard because you're trying to provide that context so that the reader sort of knows what the story is about. They introduce the characters and the world, a little bit of backstory, all that stuff, so your reader can be oriented. So when you start in the middle of a story, or really anything past like the first chapter, it can feel very disorienting. And so you have to kind of go with the assumption that the writer has already made all of those connections earlier on.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard to get used to doing that. And we had to do that with both of these. So
yeah. So I think putting everything that we're about to say in context, if you've already explained it, then it's kind of a moot point. We don't know what you've explained earlier on in this. So we're going to do our best with what we have and kind of go from there. I think my first thing is going to be pretty generic formatting. I'm sure that a lot of you know this is not technically formatted properly for a novel setup. When you're doing novel setup, you would want to do something where you're doing double spaced like you did, but not with these paragraph breaks in the middle. You want it to just be a pretty continuous, no spacing, plus the, 2 sections, and then this all would go away. And then you want to make sure that the first line of a paragraph is not indented, but every line after that should actually be pushed in like that. And this is pretty easy to do. All you have to do is just kind of control, find, and then move everything over, and then just move the top one back. So I think that it's important to remember that when you're sending these kind of things out to literary agents, they're expecting it to be in that type of format. And you can find that formatting just by typing in manuscript formatting in Google and getting some tips there. So there's a certain font size that they're expecting. There's a certain, spacing that they're expecting. And the reason that they request it that way is because they look at so many different pages that it actually helps for them to have it in one similar format. And I know a lot of agents put them on like books on their e-readers when they get them. And so having it in this kind of format makes it translate better onto their e-readers a lot of times. So just make sure that before you send this out to any literary agents, you go through and you do the proper formatting for that. Jenny, do you have anything to add?
Not about formatting, no.
Okay. The other thing is that there's a few typos in here. I think that you might want to go through and they're pretty simple, so like ma'am is technically M-A-A-M. You, I imagine you'd want to type out you. Those types of things, it's not anything big, but I would read through this with a pretty fine-tooth comb and make sure that you don't make these kind of mistakes over. But again, that's kind of like formatting stuff, it's like punctuation and grammar. Overall, I think the writing style was really, really good in here. I really liked how like straightforward it is and how easy it is to read. I think that Ami is a great character. I love her. Everything she says, I crack up at. I'm laughing so hard. And I think that Adam is kind of like the golden child, like he seems like he would be perfect. He seems like he's fitting in with the family. He seems like he's, fitting in with her. So that I think that's why this ending line was so intriguing to me, because Adam seems perfect and I want to know why he's not. So I really appreciate how this kind of like exemplified that to me. I would assume that it's kind of sandwiched in between another chapter where maybe the other contender in their love triangle is doing something else to kind of imply that he's not perfect. And then she feels that way about him still, but then this chapter comes and she should be feeling something different, but things are more complicated than that in real life. And I think that that's kind of cool to know. So yeah. Sorry, I'm waiting. I want to give Jenny a chance to talk too. I have a tendency to just ramble.
No, that's okay. No, I totally agree with you. I think that there's a lovely cadence to this narrative voice that feels very conversational. It feels literally like someone's telling us about what happened during their day, which makes it very easy to read. It's very engaging, and make it just, I think, a real pleasure to read through all of that. One thing that struck me reading this is how the dialogue really shows character, which I think is just fantastic. We want dialogue to read differently for different characters, and you absolutely nail that in this piece. Without even knowing anything about these characters, really, I can tell who's speaking at any given moment. Just by what the dialogue sounds like, which is really great.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
The other thing is, the other thing that kind of struck me is that So there's not a lot that really happens in these pages in terms of like, these aren't big flashy action scenes or anything like that. And because this is women's fiction, I think it's common to have quite a few scenes where there's not a lot of sort of external conflict happening, because the internal conflict is really more of the story. So what I struggled with a little bit, though, is that I felt like we don't, and again, this might be a context thing, but I think because we're seeing it out of context, it allows us to see this scene maybe more clearly in terms of we're reading it in context. But I feel like we don't get a lot of those connections about why these things that are happening are important. And it feels like our narrator is almost just the narrator as opposed to our protagonist too. Like she's kind of walking us through what happened, but we don't understand the meaning behind why it matters that it happened. And I think the places where we understand that the most are where we see some kind of some more internal kind of reactions from her. So like when Adam pulls up the first time, and we see her fear of, you know, please don't kill us. I don't want them to find out, you know, what we've got in the car, that kind of thing. I felt like that was where our main character came through the most, where we really kind of got to know her more than is just the narrator. So what I really wanted to see here is just more reaction, sort of in general. Give us that bridge between what happens and why it matters. To just kind of give us that context of this matters because it makes our main character react in this way. And even if I had read sort of the chapter before, the chapter after, this scene still have any of that. So I think, and this is something I see a lot. I think it might be the number one thing I see in the manuscripts that I edit, is just not having enough of that reaction in there. And for women's fiction, reaction is super important. Depending on your genre and category, you may need more or less in actual word. But for women's fiction, you actually need to see quite a bit of action, being thoughts, emotions, and then visceral or body language responses to kind of back up those emotions. And that feels like it's missing through large portions of this scene.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I think that, you know, like little sentences like this, like I put a reminder, pay Adam back in my phone. I liked those the best because of what you said. You know, it really does show how she's reacting to the situation around her. It gives us a feel for why, like what her position on this is. I think that her car breaking down, unless it was led up to this point by her own decisions, it's a little passive. Because it, you know, I mean, it happens to all of us. And I think women's fiction is one of those genres where that kind of thing is acceptable and expected, where like life just kind of happens around them, you know, and how they react to it is ultimately what the big thing is. But I mean, I almost personally would like to see, like, maybe there's a moment where like she blows off an oil appointment, you know, to change her oil, and then this happens. And then it almost gives her, maybe it might give her a little more oomph in the story, as like this, the reason that this broke down with her poor mother in the car like that was because of something that she directly did or didn't do, you know, 2 chapters ago, maybe. And I don't know if it's necessary. I'm a full disclosure, I write.
It does. There are some hints.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I don't write women's fiction.
There were some hints in there about the car being
old and old.
Sorry, we're having a little bit of a lag here.
I know. I'm trying to like if I just like sit and I was just for a minute, that's why.
I know. So I was just going to say that there are some hints in here that Adam calls her car an old heap, and that we see see her mother actually physically roll the window down, which I think speaks to the age of the vehicle, because I'm not sure they even make cars like that anymore.
Right, exactly.
So I think it does. I got the impression that there is some character building or some story there that we just don't really get because it's out of context.
Right.
That either speaks to her financial situation or, you know, something about her personality as well. Right. So So yeah, like I said, it's hard without that context to get all of that stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think one of the things that I noticed in this, if you were going to be, trimming these down, this is about 2,200 words, this piece. I think that there are parts of it that aren't super necessary to the overall story, that you could probably trim, such as like when she's when she's she signs papers for the tow truck driver right here, but then down here she also signs papers for the tow truck driver. Those kind of things, and how necessary is it for you to spend so much time talking about, like, I mean, so much time, I say it's a paragraph, so it's not that much time, but like those kind of things, I think we could probably do time skips over, where it's like the tow truck came and got my car, and you don't necessarily need to show how she goes to the place and records the address and like makes a note of it, unless there's a motivational point to it, like unless there's a plot relevant thing, like maybe she takes down the address wrong and forgets where her car is or something later on. But I think that if you were going to go in, if you needed to trim word count, that could be a good way to do it. So,
yeah. I would also kind of point out, when you're considering which details should stay and which details should go, because this takes place in our modern world, we will, a lot of those details, the reader will kind of naturally. So consider, what do you need for plot? And then what sort of makes sense within the characters? Because this is first person, especially. You've got that nice deep point of view. So what makes sense within the characters' sort of worldview, that is something that they're going to notice, something that they would comment on, kind of thing. So if this character is a particularly anxious person, maybe it would make sense for her to note that, she wrote these things down and those kinds of things. So just kind of keep all of that in mind when you're trying to make those decisions about what should stay and what should go.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Everything should be directing us into the kind of person that Sana is. And I really liked, I'm so sorry about butchering the language, because I'm just not good at that. And I'm incredibly sorry to any viewers that I've just like butchered this language. I liked that this language was something that you don't usually see. What was it called? He was sitting in the car talking.
Urdu.
Thank you. Yeah, I liked that it was Urdu. I think that was something very unique. Like I didn't even know that language existed until tonight. So that's really cool. And I think that it was done in a really good way, where it's like you add like these kind of words in to the normal sentences in a way that felt very natural to me. So I really like that. Well, and then I like, I'm just having a chitter chatter with him. Like that, I mean, is so like just perfect dialogue for that character. And I don't mind at all. This chitter chatter is just, again, characterization for him, the way that he responds to that. Like that's all beautifully done. And I'm very, very impressed. I really would like to know, I mean, again, because it's the middle of the book, we really don't know a lot about what Adam's deal is, that I would like to, which I know isn't something in this chapter that needs to happen, but like, this is intriguing. I think that this is a good chapter. Yeah. Jenny, do you have anything else to add? I think I've said everything that I had to say.
Yeah. So I just finished watching Never Have I Ever on Netflix, which I highly recommend if anyone hasn't seen it. It's a young adult show, and the family in that is from India. And this Sana could be that main character grown up. Her name is Devi, and there's so much in here that is very similar in terms of trying to bridge that gap between sort of American culture and the more traditional culture from another country, that kind of Desi culture. I think, and it's exciting to see from a standpoint of wanting to have more inclusion, and from the standpoint of how many people in our country are, kind of living that right now. So it's really cool to see that both on that young adult front, and then, seeing almost that same character, but in this more adult context was really cool. So I really enjoyed it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that was beautifully articulated. I concur. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Noreen, for sending us this. This was a pleasure to read. and I really enjoyed it. So, all right, so we're moving on. We are now going into Anna's Mystery on the Mersey. It's a historical fiction. So let's see, let's go back up. Okay, so historical fiction. All right. Alfred Augustus Dunning III frowned at his timepiece. His daughter and grandchildren were expected at 1 o'clock. It was now 10 after, with no sign of them. He was not miffed because he was fond of his family and missed their company, but because he expected punctuality in all of his subordinates, including blood relations. He'd come to expect disappointment with his daughter, but her tardiness was still irritant. Despite the fact that he'd had supervision of Leah's upbringing after his wife's death, he'd still not been able to instill a lick of common sense or decency in her. As a child, she'd been spoiled, only interested in having toys more elaborate than the other children's. He held out hope for her until she blundered with her fiancé, giving away the milk before her betrothed could buy the cow. That suitor had been the second son of an earl, with the eldest son posted in Kabul. One day I'll learn how to pronounce things. There is a very good possibility that Leah's fiancé would have inherited the title. Alfred was no fool. He'd known that Leah was in dire straits soon after her suitor ceased calling. Nothing went on under his roof that he was not aware of, but even calling out the swain had not brought him back to his daughter. If only he'd had a son instead of having to settle for Brian Henry. His musings were interrupted by a soft knock at the door, followed by his butler announcing that his daughter and grandchildren had finally arrived. Very good, I'll be down momentarily. Alfred rearranged papers on his desk for exactly 10 minutes before leaving his study. While he expected punctuality to his summons, he was a master at keeping others waiting. Pausing at the doorway to the drawing room, he surveyed Leah and her children. His daughter was not looking her best today, with dark circles under her eyes and a puce dress that did nothing for her complexion. And his grandchildren, a popinjay, a spoiled miss, and the youngest one, the only grandchild with any promise, his intelligence lost in a sea of social ineptitude. Alfred could have wept with the injustice of it all. However, since he was not a man to give in to his emotions, he instead made his presence known with a gruff "Humph," and enjoyed watching them scramble to present themselves. "Papa," Leah extolled, sweeping him toward him with arms outstretched. He held himself rigid and allowed her to peck his cheek. "You're looking well today." "Unfortunately, my dear, I cannot say the same about you. Please do not ever wear that dress again. It does nothing for your color." "Ah, yes, well, I was thinking of donating it to my maid," Leah stammered. "The children are pleased to see you." The boys gave a slight bow, and Henriette swooped into a poorly executed curtsy. "Good afternoon, Grandpapa. I'm delighted to be here, and I have a new piece to perform for you." Alfred's nearly squinted against her voice, which managed to be both grating and petulant. He only hoped she found some rich, half-dead sod during her season. It's unfortunate we are not in the music room, as I'm sure it would be an experience for the senses." Turning his back on them all, he crossed to his chair, which was cunningly situated on a slightly raised dais, so anybody facing him would not only be forced to sit half-turned on their own seat to hold a conversation, they must also look up to do so. This, he imagined, ensured their maximum discomfort. They settled into their seats, and he suggested Leah ring for tea. He remained silent while the maid set up the tea service and departed, leaving his daughter to do the pouring. He had took his time adding sugar to his tea and stirred it very, very slowly. Finally, Leah drew in a deep breath and said, "Papa, So tell me, George, what school have you chosen to attend? Charterhouse, Eton, Harrow?" George sank even further into the settee and looked as though he'd been asked if he had plans to butcher his family that evening. Leah chimed in, "We haven't decided yet, Papa. George is averse to attending public school." "Averse? What does it matter if he's averse or not?" Leah recoiled as if she'd been slapped. "Do you think I achieved my level of success by hiding in my father's house? No, I did not. I attended public school and I made connections." Turning to George, he continued his harangue. "How do you think you get ahead in this world? Through connections, that's how. I suggest you get over your aversion to people at some point this week and select a school so that I may write to the headmaster and reserve your place in the autumn." "Yes, sir," George stammered, his face nearly purple. "Grandfather, if I may." Alfred turned towards the interruption to see Alex leaning against the mantel as if he was dependent on it to hold him up. "Stand tall, boy. Have a little pride in yourself. Don't know what's the matter with your generation, lounging about as if you have no backbone." Alex straightened and visibly swallowed. "I'd like to speak with you about my commission, sir." What commission is that?" "The one you said you'd purchase for me on my 19th birthday, sir. It's just passed." "Is that all I am to you? A money purse?" To his credit, the young man didn't flinch. This one might have some potential after all. No, sir, but I don't wish to follow in my father into journalism, and I never had a head for figures, though I'd love to emulate your business acumen. So I feel like my best fit would be in the military, most particularly the Royal Dragoons. Want to serve the Queen, eh? Alex nodded, clearly warming to his subject. Yes, sir. No point in starting at the bottom, and the Dragoons have much more striking uniform than the 7th Hussars. I believe red is to be a very good color for me. Oh, no, Papa. Surely Alex could assist you in your shipping company. Think of my poor boy being posted to some beastly location like India is enough to give me a fit of the vapors. It would serve the fool right to be sent to India and die of cholera before he can prove himself. I will consider both possibilities and come up with the best solution. Leave it to me. Alex withdrew to the other side of the fireplace, a mutinous frown on his face. And so it went for the better part of an hour, with his offspring attempting to engage him in conversation over some utterly mundane topic, or not so subtly ply him for requests for money. He deftly steered the conversation to his advantage and neatly put down any attempts to deprive him of a farthing. The clock struck 2:30, and he stood, indicating the visit was over. The children scattered to the vestibule, waiting for their carriage to be brought around. He walked out at a more sedate pace with Leah, ignoring her chatter, and pinned George with his stare. Do not forget, young man, I will be expecting a decision at this time next week. George gulped and Leah simpered. Of course, Papa. I will discuss it with Brian as soon as he returns home this evening. See that you do. Then he turned on his heel and returned to his study, leaving them in the foyer, hopefully a little less full of themselves than they'd been upon his arrival. Alfred paused in the doorway, looking forward to whiling away the afternoon by reviewing a new contract. A blue envelope sat neatly on the center of his desk. He frowned. It hadn't been there an hour ago. He lowered himself carefully to his chair, his hands on either side of the envelope, hesitating to pick it up. Gingerly, he gripped a corner of the blue paper as though it might burst into flames at any moment. Then he shook off his foolishness at the thought that there might be anything sinister in the missive. It was just an envelope. Decisively, he slipped the top and removed the cheap paper. The note was short and nearly illegible. I know what you did. You are an evil man, and if you do not meet my demands, the entire world will know of your nefarious deeds. Alfred snorted. There were no skeletons in his closet that would concern anyone. While his business dealings may have skirted the boundaries of morality, they were all decidedly legal. Yes, he'd made the bulk of his fortune shipping opium into China before the wars made that market less profitable. Some of his current business dealings might raise an eyebrow in polite company, but he couldn't think of anything that would merit blackmail. If he did engage in any activity that might be considered unsavory, a large donation to any injured party ensured their silence. Whoever penned this has a lot to learn about the blackmail business. Alfred threw the letter into the fire. I love Alfred, man. I love him, but simultaneously, but I love the reasons that I hate him. I think he was just, his character, I think, was just beautifully done. I really love, it's like the little details, I think, with him, the way that he positions his chair just so, the way that he makes them wait for 10 minutes after making him wait for 5, I think that's just all, those are just fantastic details to keep in mind when you're writing a character like this. And it's just what makes him, to me, just stand out so much on the page. Jenny, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree. It reminded me of a manager buying a gigantic wig to make everyone else in the room feel small. And he's obviously, he's used to power and control. Yeah. We see that very clearly in his character. And we get his voice so clearly from the very beginning.
Yep.
So I think all of that is really fantastic. I also got a really strong sense that this is historical from literally the first sentence.
Yeah.
Timepiece is not a word that people use anymore. And I feel like this character's name tells us everything we need to know about him. So that first sentence, I feel like sets up exactly what we need to know to get into this scene. Even without the context of the rest of the story. So I think that was really fantastic. I did struggle a little bit with the other names though. So Alfred Augustus Dunningbird has this, very grand, very old-fashioned kind of name. And I know this takes place in the 1800s. And Brian just feels like a very modern name. So does Alex as character names. So Leah does as well. I don't know anything about these names or whatever, but just your readers might not. So they just feel like very modern names to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I might suggest considering changing those names to being something more suited to the time period.
Yeah.
George is great. That's a good name for that time period.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one thing that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that I would definitely agree that the names should probably be moved down. I love the little sentences that you put here and there, like this sentence I read and I loved. A Poppin' Jay, a spoilt miss, and the youngest one. Like just like the way that that was phrased,
Mm-hmm.
like what a beautiful way to set the context of the time, but also in a way that does a lot for his character. Like very, very good word choice is happening, I think, in this. I
Mm-hmm.
think that in the first couple paragraphs right here, you fall into a little bit of the telling instead of showing problem. I learned a lot about Alfred and how he viewed things, but I don't think that I learned more in these first couple paragraphs than I did later on when he was physically talking to them. I feel like most of the things that you
Right.
talked about in these first couple paragraphs were actually explained better later on, so I'm not really sure how necessary that telling is. And I know that when I was initially reading this, I like that part of my brain when telling starts instead of showing, like I lose the engagement. And so that part of my brain was kind of like, oh, we're telling now, and I like almost started to skim until we got to the point where, like
Mm-hmm.
here, very good, I'll be down momentarily. Like this was where you regained. So like really it's just these 3 paragraphs that I wasn't, or 4 paragraphs, I guess, that I wasn't super into. And I think that's just, again, I think you did it better later on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I also think that for,
Um,
oh yeah,
I Oh, I was just going to say on that topic that my note was a little further down, that
oh,
the main action of the scene doesn't really start until Leah comes into the scene.
mm-hmm,
That everything prior to that, which is a little ways into page 2. So we have a little bit over a page of almost like setup. And it is very telling setup.
mm-hmm,
It's all sort of exposition. And while it's in Alfred's lovely voice, it is still just sort of exposition.
mm-hmm,
So I actually think it might be better to start the scene closer to where his butler announces that they're there. And
mm-hmm,
then those first 3 long paragraphs, most of page 1, and then the paragraph that's in between where the butler comes in and where Leah comes in. So that gives you about a page there of exposition. If you could kind of cut that up and work that into the rest of the scene more, I think it would be much more effective, because the other thing that feels like it's missing is so particularly with George and Leah's reactions. It says that Leah looked as though she had been struck. Um, but we don't really see what Alfred thinks of that, right? So like from his worldview, it feels like he's actually intentionally trying to make them feel this way.
mm-hmm,
So I almost feel like we would want to see almost like a sense of victory in having, wielded this power and control over his family out more throughout the scene.
yeah,
And I think that would be a fabulous way to add that, as well as, seeing how he kind of lords this power over everyone, and adding in that exposition throughout, kind of breadcrumbing it. If anybody's, I know some of you are familiar with that term I use. Kind of instead of having this big chunk of it up front, creating little breadcrumbs throughout the scene,
mm-hmm,
and then tying those into just a little bit more reaction. I don't feel like this one needs the same level of reaction because there's already quite a bit in here, but just to have that sort of felt sense of victory for his family members, like he's still the big strong dude, that he's the big man. So and I think that the exposition would sort of boost all of that up if you broke it up more like that too.
yeah. I would completely agree with that. I think that there's a lot of things that you do very, very well, and I think that this is just the one thing that I really noticed was the telling over the showing. One of the other things that I wanted to mention
Mm-hmm.
was what was it? Nope, it's gone. I lost it. Hang on. Let me try to like think of what I was going to say. I had one other thing.
You'd think you were the one that it was almost 11 o'clock at night.
I know, right? Pathetic. Today has just been one of those days where I'm just like, oh my God. Trying to think of, oh, that was what it was. Okay, so overall story discussion. I've got my monitor over here. That's why I'm like gesturing in this general area. Overall, so what we know about this author, she sent us some information. She said that George, the 12-year-old, is one of the main characters. He's visiting his grandfather with his mother, Leah, his brother, Alex, and his sister, Henriette, who is 16. This is chapter 4. So this takes place a couple chapters into the book already, before anyone's arc starts. So it's a good starting point for their dysfunctional family, beyond the fact it's set in Liverpool, 1862. So knowing that coming from the author, I'm not actually sure why we're switching to Alfred's point of view at chapter 4. That seems like a bit odd to me. And as much as I loved Alfred as a character and like getting into his head and watching how he does things, if the main character is 12 years old, I'm not entirely sure how necessary it is to go into his position at all. And I think it's just going to depend on what else happens around this chapter. Again, it's hard because we don't really have the context of what's going on here. But it seems odd to me that in chapter 4, we would switch to an adult, especially if the main character is 12 years old. That almost implies to me that it would be a historical middle grade. But I don't think, like, none of this feels middle grade to me. So then it could potentially be like, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird type situation where it's like maybe reflecting from the past, but on the future. But at the same time, then we get into Alfred's point of view, and I'm just not really sure where that fits in the conversation, or within the genre. So what do you think, Jenny?
Yeah, I agree. I struggled a little bit with this. It feels, in a lot of ways, I feel like the overall tone feels very middle grade. In that Alfred is almost a caricature. Don't really get a lot of depth in his character, in his personality, and it does very much feel like it could be sort of the way a 12-year-old boy would see his grandfather.
Yeah.
So what I struggled with in terms of, though, is that there's a lot of big words in here that would not really be appropriate for a middle grade audience.
Right.
If it's middle grade, it's hard to say without the context, the chapters, if if the rest of the characters don't necessarily have that same kind of, or if that is kind of just the tone you're going for in the overall story. Again, it's so hard to make those kind of determinations when you just get chapter 4, and you don't get to see all of the chapters surrounding it and all of the rest of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think if this is middle grade, I like the overall tone, but I don't think it's going to be marketable with adult points of view in it.
Right. Well, and
it's just not really the way middle is written right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and middle grade is my wheelhouse. I do middle grade fiction. And so I would agree. Right. I know that my agent would never let a point of view chapter from an adult fly in a middle grade book that I wrote. It has to be about the kids if it is middle grade.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm not sure that this is. I feel like there are, like you said, middle grade tone, like points of the caricature. I think you're right. If this was truly an adult, you'd want to get a little more into like why Alfred is like this, as opposed to just that he's like this. But I because she says that George is just one of the main characters, it implies to me that there might be other adults that are also main characters that would maybe raise this out of middle grade, if that was the case. So it's kind of hard for me to decide, I guess, because like I see where you're like, absolutely, there's a lot of middle grade things here, but if this were truly middle grade, a chapter like this would have to be cut and rephrased from the kid's point of view. I just it wouldn't be, you'd have to show walking into this massive manor of a house and feeling very small, and then being confronted by this evil man who he barely knows, but is technically family and he has to be friends with, you know, and how suddenly, immediately, this man is starting to tell him that he cannot exist the way that he's been existing, and he has to go do these socializing things that he doesn't want to do. And like, what a villain in this kid's story, you know, like, I mean, and I think he's a villain in most of their stories. Anybody who's related to him, I think he's going to be the villain. But I think that if you're going to keep him the way that he is, we need to know why he doesn't think he's the villain. You know, like, why doesn't Alfred think he's the villain? Why does Alfred think he's the hero? You know, like, why is he like this, I guess? And that's going to be tricky to tell. And I'm not sure how necessary it is to even tell, depending on who the main characters are and how often Alfred comes back up. So I think that's they're all things to consider. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the only sort of exception to that might be if this is written in an omniscient point of view, and sort of that almost caricature-like voice here is the omniscient narrator's voice. Then in that case, it might be acceptable for it to be adult or middle grade. It just kind of depends on what exactly you're going for.
Right.
So yeah, it's all stuff for you to think about in the larger context of your story. I will say that I absolutely love where this chapter ends.
Oh yeah.
Because it gives me that sense of like, this horrible man is hopefully going to get his comeuppance, which is always kind of a nice feeling to have in a kind of story like this. Overall, I think that the writing is really fantastic here. It made me want to keep reading. And yeah, I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I do think that on the topic of the blackmail at the very end, considering how like perfectly it was built up in this paragraph, I feel like this felt a little cartoonish to me. I almost think that in this kind of thing, less is more, where like, even if you just did like 3 or 4 words where it's like, I know what you did, period, and left it at that, then I almost think that that would feel more realistic to me, because it's so vague that suddenly now I want to know, what did he do? Who's sending him this letter? And what's going to happen next? You know, like I think that if it was just, I know what you did instead, I think that that would feel a lot more powerful to me than, you are an evil man. We already know that he's an evil man. And if you do not meet my demands, it's pretty obvious it's blackmail already. The entire world will know that's how blackmail works. So I'm not really sure that this sentence is super necessary. But that's just me.
No, I agree.
So, but otherwise, I mean, I think that this was great. I mean, I really enjoyed like the placing in the time period. I feel like if it is middle grade, you very rarely see this type of historical middle grade. You don't really see, like, what did she say? Liverpool in
1862, I think.
That's so unique. I feel like I don't think that I've ever seen a book set in like a middle grade book set in Liverpool in 1862. So I don't know if this is middle grade. I think that you're on the right path here. I just think that a chapter like this might not have a ton of positioning in a middle grade book for, like you said, marketability. But if it's not middle grade,
right,
I enjoyed it. So yeah. I guess that's it. Anything else to add, Jenny?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. All right, well then that concludes our Monday critique. Thank you so much for coming, Jenny. I appreciate it. And I hope, let me get this banner off. There we go.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry that we had a bit of a disconnect with our timing. Hopefully we all got to say what we wanted to say. But thanks so much. And I hope to do this again. And if you guys are all around, feel free to tune in next time. And we will all see you then. And Jenny, if I'm not mistaken, you and Carly are going to be taking over on the 22nd, right? And doing something, not the critique. You're doing something else. Okay, do you want to talk about that for a minute, just in case?
Who are we?
I don't know.
I don't think I know.
Oh, okay. Carly mentioned that you're going to be doing some
It might be a secret from me, too.
She said that you guys were going to be doing some kind of story chat. She's like, can we hijack it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I guess it's going to be a fun surprise for everybody involved then. But yeah, something fun's going to be happening.
Me too.
Yep. So y'all stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, we will be around on the Discord server. So if anybody wants to chat with us, find us there. Or Jenny's on Twitter a lot. I'm not on Twitter hardly at all, but Jenny's on Twitter a lot. So
I'm learning Discord. I'm working on it.
It's a bit of a learning curve, but I mean, now that I'm on it, I'm solidly just like Discord all the time. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. We really appreciate it, and we'll hope to see you next week. Bye.